Hi, welcome back to All About the Sound, making learning English easier with the 3P approach. We are continuing with our discussion on phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is the second P in our learning approach. So when we talk about phonological awareness, we're talking again all about the sound. We're not worried about what we're seeing or what we're reading or how those sounds are represented in words yet in the written form. We are listening. So it is so important for this session especially that you tune into your listening ears and listen for the sounds you are hearing. That will make it so much easier in the long run for you to spell and represent your words much easily. Easily is not a word, but I just added it. Make it much easier to write your words on a piece of paper. So again, it's all about the sound and phonological awareness. And we are combining the basic units of sound, which are again our phonemes, and we're combining those into word parts. We are focusing on onset and rhyme for this component. Onset again is the beginning of a small one-syllable word or word part. Okay, so it can be a syllable within a word, but we'll see this onset. And there is no vowel sound in the onset, just the consonant sounds. And the rhyme is the ending of that word or word part. And the vowel is in the rhyme. The rhyme begins with a vowel and may or may not end with a consonant sound. So the onset is the beginning that we'll be listening for. The rhyme is the ending of words that we'll be listening for. And because rhyme, R-H-Y-M-E, is so essential to our memory loves rhyme. In fact, we are likely to remember things better when they rhyme. And we can also remember all the associated things around those words when the words rhyme. So rhyming is very important, and it can help us with our learning English. And you don't have to be in grade school or primary classes to rhyme your words. You can use rhyme now as an adult learner to help you learn English better. So please put on your hearing aids if you need them, tune them up, and we're going to get ready to learn a little bit more about onset and rhyme and the sounds we are hearing. So let's do a little review of onset and rhyme, just so we're clear before we begin. Onsets, again, are the beginning of one-syllable words or word parts. They're the consonants only. And rhymes are the ending of the one-syllable words or word parts. They contain the vowel sound and possibly, but not always, an ending consonant sound. So we're going to look at repeated sound. Repeated sound will help with our memory and our learning of English. So any sound that is repeated will help the mind to recall those words or to store those words in a way that they're easier to recall. So when onsets are repeated throughout a spoken or written passage, that is called alliteration. So our onset, remember, are the consonant sounds that come before the vowel sound in a short one-syllable word or word part. And when these are repeated, what we're going to hear is just what's called alliteration, a sliding over those words that we're hearing. When rhymes are repeated throughout a spoken or written passage, that is called rhyme. So you see rhyme, the things that we've been working with, were spelled R-I-M-E, and this rhyme is spelled R-H-Y-M-E. They sound the same because they're homophones, but rhyme means the repeated sound of rhymes. Okay, so when words at the ending of words are repeated, we will hear a rhyme, and the mind and memory really like rhyme. So again, alliteration is the repetition of onsets, those consonant sounds that come before the vowel sounds, and they're more clear in one-syllable words or word parts. So let's listen to this little poem, or little line of a poem called Laundry by Ruth Moose. And it goes like this. From socks to shirts, the salves we shed. From socks to shirts, the salves we shed. From socks to shirts, the salves we shed. So we're hearing a lot of alliteration in those words. We're hearing the S sound in socks and salves. We're also hearing that sh sound in shirts and sheds. We're also hearing a very kind of subliminal repetition in salves. We're hearing that S again. So all that repetition of the S sound and the sh sound make that poetic passage kind of flow like music in our ears. That is soft alliteration. When it's easy on the ear and easy to say, it's soft alliteration. When it's not so easy to say, well, we're going to get into something else. So soft alliteration allows our mouth and tongues to just slide along the movement of the words when we pronounce them. And they're very easy and almost soothing to the ear, as in the previous slide. But we can also have something called harsh alliteration, which is a harsh repetition of those onsets. Again, in alliteration, we're talking about the onsets, the consonant sounds that come at the beginning of a short one-syllable word or word part. So let's listen to some harsh alliteration. And we call this particular passage a tongue twister, because in harsh alliteration, I have to make different movements with my mouth and my tongue. I have to go from one sound to another sound, and it's not smooth. It's awkward to the mouth, and that's why they call them tongue twisters. They're also a little hard to hear, and they're very challenging to have to say fast several times. So let me repeat this one common tongue twister that you might hear English speakers using. She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells at 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 the seashore. It's very hard to go from that sh and that s when I'm going as fast as that, when there is so many of those sounds. So as you can see by the phonetic symbols at the bottom, we are using the sh sound and the s sound. So we go sh, s, sh, sh, s, sh. That's the phonetic sounds we're making with those onsets at the beginning of these words. And that repetition makes it a little hard for the ear and for the tongue. Those are tongue twisters. So repeated onset is alliteration. When the consonants at the beginning of a small word part or word are repeated, that's alliteration. We also have repetition of sound in the rhymes, the ending of these one-syllable word parts or words. And that repeated rhyme is called rhyme, R-H-Y-M-E. We tend to recall the ending sounds of words more than we do their beginning. And this is why rhyme, R-H-Y-M-E, is so good for the memory. It helps us to store those words in our brains and to make them easier to recall later on. So we tend to recall the ending sounds of words more so than we do their beginning. Rhyme, then, is a very valuable learning tool. It can help us with our learning of English. And it has been used in primary and elementary classes for many years because it does help with our memory and words, so we can later recall how they sound, how they're spelled, and what they mean. Why is it so helpful? Memory likes rhyme. Rhyme makes recall and association easier. So rhyme, then, is a valuable tool that we are going to use even as adult learners to help us learn a second language, especially the second language of English, which really uses a lot of rhyme. So again, rhyme is the ending of small word parts or words, one syllable usually, and it begins with a vowel sound, and it may or may not end with a consonant sound. But we definitely hear the vowel sound in a rhyme. Now rhyme, there's several very common rhymes that we will go over later on when we get into phonics that are common to the English language. But we're not going to focus on spelling right now. Again, I can't stress enough, it's all about the sound. So I really need you to hear what I'm saying as I pronounce these words, especially the endings, that vowel sound and that ending consonant sound if it is there. So focus on that as you listen. And what you will see are the phonetic notations and symbols for those sounds, not the spelling. So as you can see in that little first column, we're going to begin connecting those pictures with the phonetic notations so we can sound out those words. I am just showing you the phonetic notation for at. And we're going to repeat that at. We're going to change the onset of each of these words, but we're keeping the at. So listen for that at in these words. So the ending, and that's all you see up there, is the rhyme, the vowel sound and the ending consonant sound. So let's begin with that first picture. You know what it is. And that's how we sound it out. Cat, cat, cat. That's the phonetic notation. Rat, rat, rat. Oh, there should be a bat, bat. So we have that repetition of the at sound. Do you know what that might be? It's tricky. Splat, splat. And I needed 3 phonemes in the onset to make that sound, to make that word. And the next one is flat, flat, flat. So we've got at as our rhyme, and we've made words with it by adding onsets. Cat, rat, bat, splat, and flat. And it's good to enunciate each of those words as you say them out loud to yourself. So keep practicing saying them and hearing that at sound especially. We're ready to move. Now we are going to rhyme. We're going to use those words that we looked at in the previous slide and put them together for a rhyme. Okay, a silly little rhyme. So listen as I say these words. The cat sat on the rat sat on the bat, and with one big splat, they all went flat. See the repetition of that at sound? That's rhyme. Let's go again. The cat sat on the rat sat on the bat, and with one big splat, they all went flat. Now, more than not, the rhyme will be at the end of each line, like rat, bat, splat, flat, are my major rhyme in this little piece. I still have cat sat, rat sat in the middle of my line that rhymes, but in true rhyme, especially in poetry, we're looking at that ending sound at the end of a line. We have a repetition of at in all of those lines, so that is what we're hearing. That is rhyme. Again, I want you to hear these sounds. We're not worrying about how they're spelling or how they're spelled, even though we're seeing the words come out on our page here. I want you to focus on what you're hearing. So we're hearing the rhyme and the rhyme, okay? We're hearing the ending sound of the word, which is the rhyme, R-I-M-E, and you're hearing the rhyme of those repeated sounds, which is R-H-Y-M-E. So let's try a little nursery rhyme. Let's try a common one often heard. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Now you'll notice we have umpty and dumpty both highlighted in the same color because their rhymes are the same. Even though it's a combination of two word parts, we have the similar rhyme. We have one word part that has the ump, one word part that has the t, so it's actually a combined rhyme. Humpty. So we have umpty, umpty. But we're not too much focused on this because we want to hear the sound at the end of the line. That's where our true rhyme comes in. Sat on a wall, and you will see the phonetic symbol for that. It's all, all, all. Okay, that's the repeated sound that we're going to be listening for. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Fall. Again, the exact same sound, exact same phonetic notation following through on the second line. All the king's horses and all the king's men. So we're seeing that the N at the end of men is highlighted because we know another word that sound's going to be repeated in the next line at the end of the next line. You see the phonetic notation beside it. Couldn't put Humpty together again. Now this is not the actual pronunciation that you might hear in nice long English, but it is the slang version of it, and that's why those two sounds match, okay? The N sound. So let's try that again. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. As you can see by this rhyme, what's happening, it's almost making the word, the use of the words and the pronunciation of the words like music, like a song. There's flow, okay? And what we're also seeing is something called a rhyme scheme. The rhyme scheme here is A, B, B. Do you know why? I'll leave you with that for now. So we're going to try a poem now, a poem. The best use of rhyme and the best way to cement these sounds in your ears and to help you recognize them is to listen to and recite poetry, okay, in English, because you will hear both the alliteration of the onset being used as well as rhyme. Not all poetry has to rhyme, mind you, but some of the classic ones do. So that rhyming will help you to pick up those sounds that you're hearing, okay? Poems rhyme when the sound in the last word of each line is repeated in something called a rhyme scheme. In Humpty Dumpty, I gave you the AABB because the sound at the end of the first line was repeated in the sound at the end of the second line. Okay? And the sound repeated in the next rhyming sound was repeated in the final one. So we had two lines at the beginning that had the same ending rhyme. And then we had two lines at the end that had the same ending rhyme. So that's AABB. If my first line ends in one sound and my second line ends in another sound, that's AB. And I can repeat that rhyme that way. That would mean that my third line rhymes with the ending sound at the end of the first line, okay? And we're not going to get too hung up on rhyme scheme now. This is not a poetry class. I just want you to have an idea so you're recognizing and picking up the sounds. So again, we are listening, not so much are we worried about what we're seeing. So I'm going to begin with a very famous and common English poem that was written by a poet by the name of Robert Frost, who is from New Hampshire in the United States. And he was the late 18th century, most of the 19th century, and he passed away in 1963. Anyway, he wrote this very famous poem called The Road Not Taken. Now, this poem has a rhyme scheme of A-B, A-A, and B. Now, I want you to be listening to the sounds that come at the end of every line. I'm going to recite the poem to you. You can close your eyes if it helps you to hear the sounds. Do whatever you must, but I want you to listen. This is all about listening, not what you're seeing. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for the passing there, had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Some were ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Okay? So let's look at the first stanza. Stanza is like a paragraph in a poem. And we're going to read it again. I'll read it to complete, and then we'll go back and we'll look at each line. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Okay. As you can see after the end of each line, not only do we have the highlighted rhymes, R-I-M-E-S, in the ending words, we also have the phonetic symbol for those sounds. The phonetic symbols you're seeing are just for the rhyme. They do not include the onset sounds, just the rhyme sounds, because we're focusing on rhyme, R-I-M-E, in rhyme, R-H-Y-M-E. So we see ud in wood, okay? We see oath in both. Then we have ud in stood, ud in could, and oath in growth. So the green, of course, all contain the same ending rhyme sound, ud. And the yellow contain the same ending rhyme sound, oath. So we have would, stood, could, both, and growth for this. That's where our rhyme is coming in. And moving on to the second stanza, the second paragraph. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. So we have green, three green words again, because our rhyme scheme is A, B, A, A, B. So all our A's are in green, our B's are in yellow. And that's where our rhyme scheme comes from. So the first sound we're hearing at the end of the first line in that rhyme is air, air, air. I hear air in fair. I hear air in the third line, where. I hear air in there. There, where, there, all have that air sound, and you see the phonetic symbols related to that sound. Claim and same, claim from the second line, same from the final line, have the aim sound. Again, we're not worried about how they're spelled. We're listening to how they sound. And the rhyme is all about the sound. And so they have the aim sound. Let's move on. Now in stanza 3, I want you to listen again. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So again, A, B, A, B. All the green is the A, all the B is the yellow. So what we're seeing is that rhyme scheme. We have the first line, the first sound is the A sound. You see the phonetic notation for A. Our ending rhyme, the first line is A. Then in the third line, it's A as in day. Then we have A as in way. Lay, day, way. All have the rhyme of A. Then in the second line, in our yellow highlighted portion of that word, we have ack, ack, ack as in black. And then on our final line in yellow, we have back. So black and back both have the ack rhyme, and they rhyme, right? So you're seeing how the words are starting to rhyme. And now we're moving on to the last stanza, stanza 4. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less trouble by, and that has made all the difference. Again, our green are our A, because we got that A, B, A, B rhyme scheme, right? So our A's are our green, and the sound we have in that is A. There's no consonant sound, it's just the vowel sound. A. Oh, sorry, I. Excuse me, I. Sigh, I, the long I sound. And in the third line, we have the word I, which is I. And then in by, we have I. So those three words end in the I rhyme. And then in my second line, for hence, I have ence, ence. And that sound is repeated in the last line in difference, ence. So it's I and ence in this stanza, which are our rhymes. So as you can see, poetry really helps with the sounding out. It's a good tool to use for you to help you learn your sounds and to recognize your sounds, okay, so they can better help you represent your English later on. Poetry depends a lot on musical cadence, it's called, cadence and rhythm, and that can be created or enhanced with a combination of repeated sounds both in the onset and the rhyme. So truly great poetry that sounds like music has a repetition of sound, a perfect soft repetition of sound, a cadence in the onsets of their words as well as the ending rhyme at the end of each line. So it's a combination. And I'm going to give you an example from a very famous poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So I'm going to click. So here's a little line from The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, okay? For the sky and the sea and the sea and the sky lay dead like a load on my weary eye. For the sky and the sea and the sea and the sky lay dead like a load on my weary eye. For the sky and the sea and the sea and the sky lay dead like a load on my weary eye. Let's look at that a little bit more in detail. So let's look at the onset to begin with. Now remember, the onset are your beginning consonant sounds, okay? What are you hearing at the beginning of these short little words, okay? So you'll see several colors being used to single out the onsets that sound the same. So let's look at that first blue turquoise color, and that's the th sound, the. And we see we have the repeated again, the. Then we have the again, the. Then we have the again. So in that one sentence, we have 4 thes. And the is just usually an article, and we don't often pay much attention to it. But in this piece of poetry, it was used as a way to alliterate, to repeat sounds, so it created a tiny bit of music, okay? Now we also have sky, right? And the ska, especially that S sound. Ska is repeated twice, okay? For the sky and the sea and the sea and the sky, Okay, so we see that repetition of the sk sound. And then we have the repetition of the s sound, as in C, for the sky and the sea in the purple, and the sea and the sky. So we see that C repeated in the purple. Well, also what we could do is we could actually use that S sound in sky, because sky, the onset, has two phonemes in it. It has that S and the K sound, but we could take the S sound in sky and use that as part of our alliteration as well. So it could actually be a repetition of 1, 2, 3, 4, four of those sounds if we were to do it that way. Now let's look at the alliteration or the repetition of the onset in the second line. Lay dead like a load on my weary mind. So you have a repetition of the sound in lay, like, and load. That's 3 times that we hear that, okay? And what about our rhyming then? That was our onsets. We had a lot of alliteration in these 2 lines, and Samuel Coleridge was known for his alliteration in his poetry. But we also have rhyming. So the words at the end of each line rhyme, okay, because they have rhyme. So when I look at the word sky, the last sound I'm hearing in my rhyme is that long I sound. I, and that is repeated in I. So where you see the yellow is the repetition of rhyme in this piece of poetry. If you want to, you can pause the video here and look up the phonetic symbols for all of those onsets and all of those rhymes, so you have a good handle on phonetic notation and symbols. So let's review a little bit. There's a few things you need to remember when we're talking about onset and rhyme, and the rhyming and alliteration component of the repetition of sound. Listening for and finding the onset and rhyme in a word parts or words can help with understanding and memory recall of our English words. So it's a good tool to get used to using, onset and rhyme. Whenever you encounter a short syllable word, one syllable word, or a word that seems to have the same repetition of sound in it, then look at that. Look at what your onset might be and what your rhyme might be. Listen to music or the lyrics of songs and see if you can pick out those sounds, both in the onset and the rhyme. And listen to poetry, read poetry, do what you can to see that repetition of sound being used and to practice with it. Onset and rhyme are often used to encode or decode short one-syllable words or word parts. We're going to be looking at another way of encoding and decoding words, but onset and rhyme is a good way to get started, okay? It will help, especially because rhyme is so good for the memory. Repeated sound helps us remember things better. And can't stress enough, we're still talking about phonological awareness, okay? Which is the second of the 3 P's, which are all about the sound, not by what we're seeing. So we're not concerned about what we're seeing as far as spelling goes yet. We are listening for sound. It is so important to get those sounds, for both the sounds we are hearing and the sounds we are wanting to create. So there, we completed another section. We completed this little bit on onset and rhyme in our understanding of phonological awareness. I'm hoping that you will continue to read as much poetry as you can in English, to listen for the lyrics in certain words to see if they rhyme, to listen for that repetition of sound at the onset of words, and just see what you can and hear what you can in English that might help you to learn onset and rhyme a little bit better. We are going to talk about rhyme, especially as we go on in the phonics component of the 3 P's. But for now, it's all about the sound as we continue on for the final section of phonological awareness. Thank you again for joining me, and have a wonderful day.